So when COVID hit, the world shut down, and the fine folks at the SLA actually reached out to us early on and said, what is it you need? What does the industry need? And you think about state liquor authorities or folks that are head of ABC in various states, and I talk to my counterparts, and generally it's adversarial in a lot of ways, right? And they're sort of the boogeyman. I can tell you that the folks up here have been so helpful to the New York State Brewers Association. All the information that I was sending out to you all was coming from them. They were answering phone calls and emails. So I just want to say they do great work for us, and they're great friends. So thank you for all of that. We really appreciate it. They appreciate it as well, the information. We're very responsive, and we're very lucky to have the State Liquor Authority that we have. With that, I want to introduce, we're very fortunate to have Chairman of the State Liquor Authority, Vince Bradley, and we have Tom Donahue, and then of course our one-stop shop, Stephen Fleming, who I think most of you know, who is an incredibly valuable resource every day. So I don't think they want me to call them every day, but I can call Stephen every day, so it's easier. So anyway, with that, I'd like to introduce Chairman Vince Bradley.
Thank you, Paul. So this is, I think, the second year since COVID that we've been here, Paul? Is that correct?
Second year.
Yeah, so I kind of described last year the COVID work that we were forced to do to hopefully try to help not just your group, but all the craft distillers, the wineries, everybody to try to stay afloat. There's no question in my mind that the craft industry was certainly hurt as bad, if not the worst, of any of the alcohol parts of the alcohol industry that we deal with, because most of you rely on people to come to your places, and that's where you make most of your money, and that was impossible for a period of time, and then when it became possible, people didn't want to do it for obvious reasons. So we've come out the other end of that, but from what I understand from talking with Paul and other people in the industry, you still have your challenges bringing the people back, certainly to the level that they were pre-COVID. But despite that, I want you to know that your area of the industry continues to grow and grow exponentially every year. Since the start of 2020 and through the pandemic, the number of craft breweries has risen nearly 20%. So imagine that people are opening their businesses in the middle of a pandemic. And the number of farm breweries grew by 37.6%. And the number of microbreweries grew by 20.7%, which is just really amazing that continued to grow. That really probably is the only manufacturing license that did continue to increase during the period of time of the pandemic. And our retail licenses basically fell off a cliff for obvious reasons, for at least 6 month period. Over the last decade, the number of craft breweries statewide has risen at 455%, from just 97 in 2012 to 538 in New York State today. Last year, I discussed, when I came in here, the possibility of, or us trying to push for a temporary permit for craft manufacturers. That had not gone into effect at that point. Well, as of Tuesday, it's now been in effect for a full year. And in that time, we've seen more manufacturers take advantage of that permit, allowing them to start making beer and making sales and bringing in revenues while their license is pending and we're reviewing the application. I'm going to let Tom describe exactly what the time frame of that is. But right now, our time frames are not in the best as far as reviewing applications, but as far as attempts go, it's extraordinary that we can get businesses open usually within a month to a month and a half. Which is basically a game changer, particularly when you have rent and everything that's being paid while your application is being reviewed. So far, we have issued 160 temporary manufacturing permits. That's including distilleries, wineries, and breweries. Half of them are for craft brewers, 72. Now, I mentioned the wait times. When Governor Hochul came into office, she became aware very quickly what we were dealing with, and she immediately in last year's budget gave the SLA an extra $2 million in our budget. I've been here 8 years. That's the first time that we got any increase in our budget, and for 6 of the 8 years I was here, we got cuts. So she recognized that a lot of the wait time for the review of applications is based on the fact that we didn't have the resources to do the work that was coming in. Every time a new license is created by the legislature, whether it be a farm brewery back in the day or recently we've done a new catering license, that creates more applications, it creates more work. They weren't giving us more people to do it. That went on for decades. The problem that we've been having is all of that $2 million in resources has been pumped into licensing, which Tom is now the head of. We, like many other industries in the state, are finding it hard to find bodies to fill the jobs. We have been now for a year actively hiring or attempting to hire, and there's sometimes that we don't get any responses for the positions. And these are not minimum wage jobs. They're decent jobs with benefits, and we still can't find people to fill them. We have become even more aggressive recently, and then with the help of civil service, they've given more tests around our examiners so that we can get more people qualified to become examiners, and hopefully in the next few months we should be able to fill all of the extra positions that we've been given by the governor's office. But at this point in time, about 75% of our applicants are under temporary licenses, which means that they've been open and operating within 30 to 45 or 50 days of the application coming in. Now, the application itself may take 6 or 7 months for us to review, but at least they're still operating and able to operate while that review is going on. So in that sense, it's helped our agency produce a lot better as far as getting people open and getting people collecting revenue as quickly as possible. I know I have, even pre-COVID, I spoke about this, and it's remarkable that we're still speaking about it, but we started a full overhaul of our computer systems approximately 4 years ago. That was a third-party vendor that came in to design an entirely new system, and it's not just for in-house, but it's also for public-facing. The application process right now is still on paper. We still receive applications in the mail with a check. Once this system goes live, which should thankfully happen by the summer of this year, it's almost 3 years overdue. But once that becomes live, the entire application process will be online. So deficiencies, if you get a deficiency in your application, instead of us sending you a letter and giving you 15 days to cure the deficiency, you will now get an email immediately from the examiner. You will cure the deficiency on the computer, which will then be reviewed by us immediately. So it should, once we get everything working as we expect it to be working, once we get our workers trained on it, it should make our agency run a lot more efficiently and allow us to review applications much more quickly. This year, and I'm going to let Tom talk about this, the governor's budget, I'll just give you an idea of what it is. The governor's, in her budget, proposed a complete rewrite of the ABC law, which is a law all of you are working under, and it's a law we obviously enforce. That rewrite, if anybody's actually ever gone into the ABC law, I hope you have, but if you ever have, I'm sure you were immediately struck by the fact that it doesn't make any sense. And I am a lawyer and an accountant, and it doesn't make any sense to me, and I've been here 8 years. It is disjointed. It is not organized. They have made amendments to it that don't fit where they're supposed to go. So if you don't even realize there's an amendment, you're going to miss it. But if you did realize there's an amendment, then you have to go to another book to find it. What Tom has done, and I don't want to say this is now the third time since I've been here he's actually tried to do this, is rewrite the entire law. He hasn't changed one law. All he has done is reorganize it. He's tried to make it so that it is understandable to people reading English. And hopefully, right now, that's in the governor's budget proposal. And they're in the process right now of negotiating the budget with the legislature. Hopefully that gets done. As I said, this is the third time we have tried to do this. We have not been successful yet, but as they say, the third time's the charm, so we'll see what happens. So as I said, though, this is completely policy neutral. It's not going to change your operations whatsoever. It's not going to bring any new obligations on your businesses or anything of that nature. It's really just going to allow you to understand what you're supposed to be doing. And hopefully you do already, but this should help if we're able to get it done. I should have done this earlier, I do want to introduce our new council. Many of you may have worked with Gary Meyerhoff. He was here for about 3 years. Gary actually, I still talk to him and I make fun of him all the time because he was a partner in a major New York City law firm for 25 years, and the reason he wanted to take this job was, one, to do public service, and two, hopefully change his lifestyle a little bit because he was doing 80, 90, 100 hours a week. He got to our agency in he got to our agency in October, early November of 2019, and then COVID hit in March of 2020, and his life never really changed for the 3 years. So he stayed. He had only told me he was staying for 3 years. Once the 3 years hit, he jumped and went back to private practice. But now we have Shannon Kearney-Sarfo, who is coming to us. She's been with us for about 2 months now. She's been great so far. She's coming to us from the Albany County District Attorney's Office, and I'm going to let her come up here and say hello to you all.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your kind words, Chairman. I'm extremely excited to be a member of this agency. I've been incredibly impressed by the degree to which everyone there is engaging constantly with your community and basically the clients. So I'm looking forward to not understanding the law together with all of you. But I am looking forward to getting up to speed and being also another resource among the many wonderful resources that you already have. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to cut my remarks short so that we can get to Tom, who has the meat of what you're here for. I do just want to put out there that and reiterate what Paul said. We are here to help you. All of us are accessible to any of you. You don't need to go through Paul. You don't need to go through Steph, and you can call me directly. You can call Tom directly. You can call Shannon directly. If you want to go through them, that's fine as well. We are in regular contact with both of them. But we are here to help you. And I try to do that as best I can. I completely understand that you're all, other than Mr. Matt, emerging businesses. He's been here for 130 odd years, but most of you are new businesses. You're getting your feet on the ground. You have to be an expert in, probably a couple dozen different areas besides ours. And we get that there's confusion sometimes. And if we can clear that up or help you clear it up, then that's what we're here for. So I want to thank you for having us again, and just remember, we are completely accessible, and contact us at any time. Thank you. I'm going to put it to Tom.
You look pretty good for 130. I'm actually opposed to the ABC rewrite because once it's understandable to everybody, I'll probably be out of a job. So. I'm going to talk first about the staffing and the time frames, because the chairman mentioned that. So about a year ago, if you sent in an application, so you send it to the bank and then the bank sends it to us, it would be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks from the time it hit the bank until we got it entered into the system and you got that filing receipt. All right? We've got that time down now to about a week. And sometimes less than that, depending on staffing, all right? So you're getting that filing receipt faster. Doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna get the application reviewed faster, okay? But we are cutting down those times too. For the temporary permits, whether it's a retail license or a manufacturing permit, from the time that we get it, all right, so figure a week for us to get it from the bank. Within a week of us getting it, that application should be reviewed and the permit going out to you, assuming everything else is in order. I'll talk a little bit more about permits in a few minutes, but I just want to let you know as far as timing, that's what we're looking at. Chairman mentioned adding staff. So when I took over licensing in December of 2021, there were 19 licensing examiners. And through the efforts of the chairman and our CEO, Sharif Kabir, we got the authorization to double that number. We have been at any given time, we had, I think, 31 at one point. We have 28 right now. We actually have people who are coming in and who have left in the last year for other positions. So we still have 10 spots to fill. Those are just the examiner spots. We're still also trying to fill some support staff. But just to give you some idea, so when I took over in December 21, almost all those 19 examiners had multiple years of experience with the authority. Right now, out of the 28 we have, 7 of them have been on the job as an examiner for at least a year. So we're dealing with a lot of new staff. All right? So it does take a little while to get them trained fully and up to speed. Okay, let me talk first about the legislative updates since the last time we met. I think we talked about it, although it hadn't come into effect yet, was the change of the ingredients. As you know, for the New York State labeled beer, you had those 3 different stages until we got to the 90%, which was supposed to kick in this year. 24. Well, that's now been extended. So the 60% standard is now good until 2028. And that's when the 90% standard, unless there's some other legislative change, will kick in. More recently, there was legislation done to allow other businesses on the licensed premises. Now, we've talked about this, I think, every time I've done an event with y'all about the food trucks and things like that. We told you, just keep the food truck just outside the licensed premises and you'll be okay. So now, at least for the foreign licensees, and the legislation is only applicable to farm eatery. How many people have a farm eatery here? Farm cidery? All right, farm brewery. Okay. So if those of you who don't have a farm brewery, it doesn't apply to you. But for the farm brewers, that food truck or whatever the vendor is, as long as it's not another licensee, can now be on your licensed premises. So you don't have to worry about, is my parking lot part of my licensed premises? Do I have to file an alteration so the food truck can park there? You can have the food truck on your licensed premises, okay, as a separate business. All right, there shouldn't be any relationship other than maybe you're paying your rent for the space, all right? No profits going back and forth, that sort of thing, all right? Chairman mentioned a temporary operating permit to the manufacturers. Just want to point out a couple little side notes to that. There is no temporary permit for a branch office. That wasn't part of the legislation, all right? We do process the branch offices faster than the regular license application. All right, so you shouldn't be waiting as long, but you cannot get a temporary permit for the branch office. If you are going to apply for an on-premises license for your farm brewery or your brewery, all right, you can get a temporary license for the retail operation to run along with your temporary permit for your manufacturing operation at your licensed premises, at the manufacturing premises. Can't do it for the branch office. You need to wait till the branch office permit is issued. All right, so if you have a branch office and you want to have a retail operation, a tavern, a restaurant, what have you, at the branch office, you need to wait. The reason for that is that we can't give you a temporary permit to run a standalone retail operation separate from your manufacturing site. You all know about the Tied House law. That would be considered a violation of the Tied House law. The chairman mentioned the ABC rewrite that's in the budget. There are some other items relevant to you that are in the budget, or at least the proposed budget. One is we are proposing to tweak the corporate change process. How many of you have ever submitted an application for a corporate change? How many of you are annoyed how long it takes to get the corporate? Okay. We process those right now, and this was a decision made administratively years ago. I don't mean administratively by the chairman, by whoever was in my seat, that we would process them just like a new application, as far as the time frame is concerned. So it takes just as long for a corporate change as it does for a regular license. I really can't undo that at this point because of just the logistics of everything. But this bill would allow you to do the corporate change before you get the approval, as long as you get the approval down the road. All right? So it wouldn't hold up your business transaction. You could go ahead with that and then file the corporate change. As I said, that's just in the budget. We'll have to wait and see what the final budget looks like. The other item that's in there that may be relevant to you is, now that we have temporary permits for retailers and for manufacturers, the only ones who can't get one are the wholesalers. So we've proposed a temporary permit for wholesalers as well. All right. We've also been proposing some changes to the length of time that the retail license permits run. Your manufacturing temporary permit runs for 6 months. The retailers only runs for 90 days, and then they have to get extensions. So we've been discussing some changes to that as well. Over the course of the last year, the full board's been very busy issuing advisories to kind of speed up the licensing process. I'm going to go through just some of the things we've done so that if you're planning on a new application, whether it's a manufacturing license or a retail license, you know what to expect, and hopefully it will save you some time. So we've cut down on who has to file a personal questionnaire. It used to be, if you had less than 10 stockholders to 10 owners, everybody had to file a personal questionnaire. Now it's only those who will have 10%. All right, and we're not asking for, if you have a board of directors, we don't need those people. We don't need personal questionnaires from them. It's just the president, the vice president, the secretary, treasurer, and then whoever owns 10% or more of your business. The diagrams. We've cut down, doesn't impact you as much because several years ago we cut down on what you had to submit in a diagram, but for your retail operation, we're not going to ask you to draw like a little square showing every table in your restaurant or your tavern and a little X, showing all your chairs. That won't be needed anymore. The certificates of occupancy. This has been a big problem, especially in the metropolitan New York City area for retail licensees. All right, getting that C of O from your town or your city before you could operate, we don't ask for those anymore. The chairman has made clear multiple times that if there's an issue about you complying with local regulations, whether it's the C of O, building codes, so forth, or zoning, all right, that's an issue that has to be enforced by the municipality. All right? Now, if they do cite you for something, particularly if you have a retail license, you may be subject to disciplinary action by us, right? But we're not going to take the first step to make sure you're in compliance. Right? That's up to your local town, village, or city.
And just so I can add to that, the reason, and I did do that, as he said, the reason I did that was because over the course of time that I've been here, I have seen that the enforcement of these regulations and laws depended on what town you were in. It's just completely inconsistent. So there were some people that could get a C of O in 3 weeks, whereas in New York City it might take you 3 years. And then they weren't, in New York City they were opening businesses that didn't have COs, but I was telling people they couldn't open because they didn't have them. The coffee shop was allowed to operate, but the bar next door wasn't, because we wouldn't let them. So I basically said, if they're not going to enforce this stuff, I'm not doing it either.
Excuse me, I just filled out the liquor license for a tavern license, and everything you just said was required on that.
Well, we have not had a chance, because of all the changes, to get all the forms revised. Part of that has to do, to be honest with you, is that we've been waiting for the new system to come on board. And, how much time we're going to devote changing a lot of forms when the forms won't be around, all right?
But there's an advisory on our website that tells you what you don't need anymore.
All right. And if you get you should not get a deficiency letter saying, hey, you're missing this.
Right.
I'm going to be honest, you might, because as I said, 21 of our 28 examiners are brand new.
Well,
Okay?
I called them up and actually talked to one of them who's very helpful. a lot of stuff, since they already have a microbrewery license,
Yep.
and a farm license, and I'm just asking
Yeah.
for the.
So, but if you get something like that, if you get a conditional approval that says we need your certificate of occupancy, then you should reach out and say, are you sure I still need this, okay? All right?
It's just easy.
We've cut down on, as far as who needs a personal questionnaire, who needs fingerprints. The members have also given me some discretion in certain circumstances to waive the submission of fingerprints. We've had a trouble actually, because of the delay with applications, we can't access the fingerprint information after 6 months, so we may have to give you a waiver then, because it's nothing you did wrong, it's just because of the paperwork. Co-licensees, we have an advisory about co-licensees, we've talked about it. These are the people who are providing you some service, and they're getting a percentage of your business. Okay, this is particularly relevant to your retail operations. You're going to bring in somebody to manage your tavern, and they're going to get 15% of the profits. They're considered a co-licensee, all right? They're not your partner, but they're providing you a service and they're getting a percentage. So keep in mind that if you have an agreement like that with somebody and they're getting more than 10% of your business, they need to be listed as a co-licensee. We are not going in depth anymore about looking at deeds and leases. We used to have examiners who would read every line of a deed or a lease and they'd say, oh look, it says in here that they can't have alcoholic beverages on the premises. We don't care, okay?
I don't.
Well, think about it. The landlord is going to give you a lease to open up a bar, and there's a provision there that says you can't have alcoholic beverages. All right? If he's going to enforce that, then that's between you and your landlord. All right? We're not going to worry about it. We're just looking to make sure that the lease is between you and the landlord, the applicant and the landlord, that it's running for the term of the license, right? And there's no percentage clauses in there. Because if your landlord is getting more than 10%, it has to be a co-licensee, going back to what I just said. Because they're providing you a service, leasing you the property, and they're getting a percentage. Warehouse space. I don't know how many, anybody here has a warehouse permit? All right, so I'm getting a license, I have a premises, and it has a basement. But to get to the basement, I gotta walk outside my brewery, my restaurant, my tavern, whatever it is, go outside, go down an exterior stairway to the basement where I'm gonna store my product, my inventory. And we would tell people, well, that's separate from the licensed premises because you can't get there without going off the licensed premises. You need a warehouse permit. That was a pain in the neck. All right? So, what the members did was issue an advisory that says, if you have a space that's adjacent to your licensed premises, all right, but you can't get to it directly from your licensed premises, as long as they're connected, okay, physically connected, we'll license that as part of your licensed premises. All right. Now, for those of you with breweries, you're probably on parcels of land, so it's not as much of a problem. You may have some outbuildings, but that they're still on the licensed premises, so you don't need a warehouse permit for those. All right. If you do have a building that you want to use, that's near your brewery building, instead of getting a warehouse permit, if it's not part of your licensed premises, consider just getting an alteration application to expand the licensed premises to include the building. All right? It's actually cheaper for you. Not a big issue with manufacturers, but if you're getting a branch office or something, we've had problems with places that already have a license, but maybe the licensee left and abandoned the premises. We have a new process for that to speed it up and make it easier for us to get that place licensed. We also issued an advisory for a one-day trucking permit. So we have the trucking permit, which covers, well, let me back up for a second. You should all know that you can transport product, your own product, in a vehicle, but there's two requirements. it has to be owned by you and operated by you. It can't be owned by your employee. It can't be owned by you personally if the license is issued to an LLC or a corporation. All right? It has to be owned by whoever the license is issued to. But if you don't have that, then you need a trucking permit. And we had 3 trucking permits. We had the one that covers an individual vehicle for a year. We have the fleet permit. If you're a commercial shipper, you get a fleet permit to cover all your vehicles. We also had a company permit, which is more associated with the big brewers and the wholesalers for beer, to allow them to get a permit and then hire independent contractors to come in and operate under that company permit. Well, now the board has issued this, or allowed for this new permit. It's called a one-day trucking permit. So let's say you have a situation where you do have, your brewery does have a truck that you use for deliveries, or maybe to bring product from one event to another. But you can't, it's not available. You can get a one-day trucking permit, whether it's your employee's vehicle or a vehicle that's being operated by somebody else. You hire an independent contractor for 1 day to transport your product.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
we had a thing, I think you remember, is where we had a rep that was transporting 10 cases of beer to the Lush team for third. State trooper pulled her over and ended up arresting her, and $5,000 weeks later it was cleaned up. But, so we had all our reps have a letter in their car saying they work for the brewery and they may be transporting beer for events, but not for sale.
Right, so yeah, there is an advisory that goes back a couple of years that allows your sales staff to transport product. All right. We also, and I don't think it's in writing, but something we just have allowed, is that for the marketing permit, how many people have a marketing permit? How many people don't? Why don't you? Okay, I'll explain. What's that?
We have a restaurant.
Okay,
license, we can't.
I'll talk about that in a second. But for the marketing permit, we've been telling people, if you're transporting for purposes of the marketing permit, and I think we may have updated the advisory to say this too, that marketing permit covers the transportation for that event. The reason a restaurant brewer cannot get a marketing permit is because it's designed for the manufacturers, okay? And you're considered a retailer, all right? Under the law, your primary business is your restaurant with a limited ability to make beer, right? Versus a brewer who may also have a restaurant, but their primary business is being a brewer, right? I'll get some questions after I get done with my little list here, okay? Some compliance issues.
Well, no, so explain to the people that don't have the marketing permit why they need it.
Oh, okay. So,
Because this is a permit that when we can't find a place to put something and you're complaining to us that you're not allowed to do something, you just kind of throw it in there.
okay. All right. So, the law, under the law, there are multiple permits that you can get to do different things. Different tasting permits, different permits to sell by the bottle at different places. Going back probably now more than 10 years ago, we created this marketing permit. What it does is essentially combine all the privileges of all those permits and some other things into one permit, right? So it allows you to conduct tastings, and there is a limit to the size and the number of tastings, at any place that sells beer, or any licensed premises that sells beer, at farmers markets, at county fairs, at the state fair, and then there's a catch-all at other events. Now, the most recent change was that other event category, you used to have to send a letter to us 15 days in advance saying, this is where I'm going. All right. And we would then have that on file, and if you didn't hear from us, it was approved. We got rid of that.
Because we were reading it 2 weeks after the event.
I was going to tell them we reviewed every one, and okay.
That's
So-
why I got rid of it.
So now you can, if you look at the advisory, okay, you can go to that event and just keep a track of a record of it. But there are restrictions to how often you can do it. What we don't want you doing is using the marketing permit to set up a shop. I had one, it was a distiller, so we can talk bad about him. It was a distiller who wanted to set up a kiosk in a shopping plaza, all right, an outdoor shopping plaza, for the entire winter, Christmas holiday.
Hudson Yards, right?
No, this was Woodbury Shopping Plaza. You didn't hear that. Right? He wanted to set up a little kiosk, and now I think there's a package store in Woodbury Plaza. I'm not sure, but he wanted to set up a kiosk there, and from what the holiday season now is like September now until Christmas. For the entire holiday season and sell his product under his marketing permit. We said, no, you can't do that. You're setting up a package store. All right? So that advisory now goes into some specifics as far as how often you can use that permit at the same location during a given 2-week period and then over the year. All right? We don't want you setting up a shop someplace. But we also don't want you to prohibit you from using your marketing permit at some place you go to regularly, maybe every year, or maybe a couple weekends during the summer, that you've been doing that for years, all right? You'll still be able to do that, but just take a look at that advisory, all right? But the purpose of that marketing permit is essentially give you all the powers of doing tastings and off-premises sales that are in the law, and like I said, some other privileges, right? You can also accept offers from from retailers. You go to a package store. Let's say your wholesaler doesn't get out there as much as you'd like them to. And this is about for liquor and more. No, but for even a grocery store. Let's say you go to a grocery store, and the wholesaler isn't getting that business for you. All right, you can take an order from them and pass it on to your wholesaler. What else? Okay, so collaboration on brand labels. This has become a bit of a hot topic lately. I think I've talked about it with you several times before. And the issue is with the use of somebody else's brand name and also sharing profits. All right? So I'm not going to ask how many of you have been denied brand label registration for collaborations. It's happening a little more often, mostly because we've had staff educated on what the do's and don'ts are. All right, so it's not as though the law has changed. All right, the staff is just better educated on what the issues are. I'm not going to go into detail about all the issues. I'm just going to say I'm anticipating that the full board will issue a advisory about collaborations and brand labels in the not too distant future. All right, and it's going to go into when you can use somebody else's brand name on your label, when you can mention somebody else. I know sometimes there'll be something about all profits go to some charity or something. We're going to be addressing those issues. Contract brewing, we've talked about that a number of times, just for those of you who haven't been in one of these sessions before. You can make beer for another brewer and sell it to them in bulk. You can have another brewer make beer for you and sell it to you in bulk, and then it becomes your beer. All right? If you're making beer for another entity, that entity has to be licensed. I can't come to you with an idea, okay, for Tom's Pale Ale and say, I want you to make Tom's Pale Ale, and I'm going to get 10% of all the sales, and I don't have a license. You can't do that. All right? If you have any relationship involving the production of your product and profit sharing, okay, that other entity has to be licensed. It should be a brewer. Okay? There are circumstances where a wholesaler can own a brand label, all right? And of course, for retailers, the only situation you can have where you're using a retailer's brand name is when you're doing a private label, which is when you're producing that product only for that retailer. I mentioned this at every session I do, but I just want to repeat it again, because sometimes people come up to me later on and say they didn't know. And that has to do with the terms of sale and COD list. Now, the terms of sale for beer, and I've mentioned this before, is more confusing than the terms of sale for liquor and wine. Liquor and wine is easy. It's like you drop the product off, in 30 days the bill is due, and if you don't get paid with it, if you're the wholesaler or the manufacturer, you don't get paid in 5 days, then it have to be reported for COD. Beer is on this 2-week cycle. When we post a schedule on our website about if a delivery is made during the 2-week cycle, and then when the payment is due, right? So all I'm telling you is two major things. One is that, except for those payment cycles, you can't offer credit to any of your retail customers. How many of you sell directly to retailers? Okay. So other than giving them that window of time under the credit cycle to pay their bill, you can't give them any other credit. And if they don't pay, all right, you have to report them to the COD list. And you can't give anybody credit if they're on the COD list. So you need to check. So unless the retailer is paying you on delivery, if you're going to give them credit during that credit cycle, you need to make sure they're not on the COD list. I'll just take some questions at the end, okay? Just a reminder about franchise agreements. All right, you're supposed to have an agreement with any wholesaler you're selling product to. All right, this is the equivalent of the price posting schedules for liquor and wine, where a wholesaler or a manufacturer can designate a specific wholesaler to sell their product. You're supposed to have a franchise agreement with the wholesalers you're dealing with. Now, there's been some recent changes in the law that allow small brewers to get out of those contracts a little easier. It used to be very, very difficult, right? But now a small brewer can get out of an arrangement a little easier if you have a wholesaler who's really not moving your product for you. And the last thing I have on my compliance list is sales to unlicensed businesses. It happens over and over and over again. If you're dealing with retailers, shouldn't be a problem if you're dealing with a wholesaler, because they're usually well established, you know who they are. But if you're dealing with a retailer, make sure that retailer has a license to sell beer, and that check you're taking from them should be made out on the account from whoever's on the license. You know, if the license is Tom's Grocery Store, Inc., it can't be a check from my personal account. All right? It's got to be a check from the company. All right? And if you're getting a check that's made out by somebody else, that's probably evidence that somebody else is now running a grocery store that's not licensed. All right? And if you sell to somebody who's not licensed, you're going to wind up getting in trouble, because we can't go after the person who's not licensed. Right?
Man, on that last point there, for checking that out, the Liquor Authority has an excellent tool. It's the Liquor Authority Mapping Project, LAMP, and I check that website all the time. It's always up to date. If you want to check the status of someone's license, you can go on there. You can check by serial number, name, or address. It's a great tool, and I encourage you all to use the LAMP website as often as you can.
Our new LAMP website is not as helpful as our old LAMP site, but we are actually in the process of getting a contract to fix some things that were left out when we transitioned to a new vendor. That's more important if you're trying to get a license, a retail license, but for your purposes, there's a public license query. There's a way for you to go in and find out if a person is licensed. There's also a way for you to find out if somebody's on COD, because you should all, if you're selling to retailers, you should all have an account with us to go in and report somebody on COD and to find out if a retailer is on COD. Right? So that's usually the question I get at the end is, I've been selling to retailers and I don't have an account, okay? So you can sign up for the account. All right. I don't have anything else on my list. I said it was kind of a short list of legislative updates. So I guess we have time to take some questions. I'll take some questions. Oh, we have some questions. Okay. Let me start there.
For contracting, is there anything specific for if you wanted to sell to other breweries out of state, that you are the manufacturer?
So we look at an out-of-state as the sale takes place in the other state. Because let's say there's another brewer out of state, right? You can't sell to that brewer in this state because they're not licensed. So we consider the sale to be taking place in the other state. And because of that, you have to follow the laws of that state. It has nothing to do with us. All right? Yes, sir.
So my town has asked you to be the beer operator for their festival. And you have to go through the permitting process because it's not in licensed premises over in their area. And so you fill out all the paperwork, and there's gonna be big crowds, 250,000 people show up to this fair. But I don't get my permit for like 3 or 4 days before the event. And I'm sweating bullets saying, well, what if they don't issue me? And also they can't be beer operator at the event. Is there a way for us to get that permit?
When we get more staff.
But that's a situation, because we get hundreds and hundreds of TPAs a month. They're not 250,000 people. So they're not sweating like you are. So that's a situation that you call.
I have,
Because you're gonna get it. So I'll just make sure you get it so that you're secure that you're getting it.
don't say that he's gonna get it.
I got enough people knocking on my door. I don't need 250,000.
So I have 4 people working on permits, and 2 of those are supervisors supposed to be doing something else. All right, and now we're going to hit our busy season now. We try to get to them as quick as we can. All right. We also have to deal with people who wait either too late or just barely, and then it's the wedding. Well, this wedding's been planned for 7 months, but I filed the permit yesterday for tomorrow's wedding.
That's why we ask for them to be filed, or we require them to be filed 15 days before at a minimum. And then hopefully you get it 5 days before the event.
If you've been filing permits for a long time, you know what we need. All right? You know we're going to need that landlord authorization, right? And the diagram. And so just make sure if you put that stuff in there, okay, you're going to get the permit, because he just said you're going to get the permit. All right. But you may not get it until a couple of days before. All right? And until we can get more staff or the new system comes on board, that's going to be the case. All right? So you were in the back, so you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, thanks. What, if any, protections does the SLA kind of provide to us as suppliers? Not to sound adversarial, but kind of against wholesalers. Just for us personally, we were recently burned on over $10,000 in beer to a wholesaler in New York City who just kind of refused to pay his bills. Granted, there are, court actions that we can take against them, but from an SLA perspective, I had no ability to kind of report this guy, put him on the COD list, or anything like that. It seems to me that a lot of the time, the laws and rules with the SLA are they benefit the wholesalers a lot more, and we were kind of left in the lurch.
Well, understand that we have nothing to do with the laws, all right?
Yeah,
that's done by the legislature.
Yep.
So, we have to enforce the laws. We can't impose additional restrictions that aren't in the law.
So is there a methodology for a COD list from the kind of supplier-wholesaler relationship?
It would require a change in the law.
Okay, got it.
Even though it's a license that holds a license,
Because the COD list is distributors versus retailers. Okay, so
$17,000, to sue them is gonna cost them more.
I understand that, but the COD provisions are split between, the manufacturers and wholesalers on one side and the retailers on the other.
Iron Horse Beverage.
I mean, listen, there's nobody more sympathetic, particularly since I used to be a litigator, to what it's gonna cost, and it's not worth it to go after it.
Like you're saying,
And-
and like 4 other breweries.
And his opinion regarding which way the laws are skewed is, I'm not gonna tell you what my thought is, but you can probably gather. That is really something that needs to be dealt with the legislature, which is why you have an association like this, because it's not fair, there's no question about that. But there's nothing in the law that empowers us to do anything about it.
Can I ask a follow-up to that about the COD list on the retailer side? Do you have the power at all to, I mean, we have retailers that live off the COD list and never get off of it, and never get taken. You have the ability to revoke their license, suspend their license, any of that kind of thing?
No, the way that
That's another law thing.
the way that the law is set up is that their punishment for, if they go on COD, is that they can't get credit again. Right? They have to get, it is literally COD. They got paid when the deliveries are made.
And that's supposed to be to protect you all, so that he's on the list, and tread carefully.
Then what ends up happening is
They don't buy.
They don't pay, they pay everybody else for the future product and don't pay us. Yeah, they've got,
Yeah.
half dozen or a dozen.
But keep in mind, that's why it's important for you, because I remember having a conversation here once with somebody who said, look, I gave credit to this guy, and I found out he didn't pay somebody else. Well, you didn't look to see he was already on the COD list, all right? That's not only a good business practice for you, it's actually a violation if you do sell to somebody on the COD list. But there's nothing to remedy. The only thing in the law that is of any help to you is that if that retailer goes to sell the business and wants to get a liquidator's permit to sell to its buyer. Okay, remember, so I can't sell my license, I can sell my business, right? But I cannot sell my alcoholic beverage inventory unless I have a liquidator's permit. The law doesn't allow that retailer, if he's on COD, to get a liquidator's permit if he's on COD until he pays your bill. So he can't sell the inventory to his buyer. Right? So he's stuck with whatever he has. He can't do anything with it. He can't take it home. Right? He can't sell it to another retailer, unless he has a fire sale at his bar or his tavern, and sells everything for dirt cheap. He's stuck with that beer. Let's keep going back. Yes, sir.
If we donate a keg to a charity that is conducting their own fundraising event, I'm not there, I'm not serving, we're just donating a keg. What are the liabilities, or what do I need to ensure?
So there is an advisory on our website about donations, okay? And donations by a manufacturer or wholesaler to a not-for-profit, and differences when they're a licensee, let's say the Elks Club, okay? Does the Elks Club have a license? Right? You can't donate to a not-for-profit that has a license. You can donate to a not-for-profit that is getting a permit. But I would suggest, there's no liability in the sense of something happens, but I would read that advisory that explains the do's and don'ts of you making a donation to a not-for-profit. And it's on our website. If you go down to the bottom of the website, there's a link for guidance documents, and then you go to the advisories. All right, yes, sir.
One-day trucking permit, how long is the turnaround for the approval for that?
It's going to be just like the temporary permit. It's going to be, we want it 15 days in advance. If you file it with less time than that, it's, if we can get to it, okay? But we're looking for 15 days, and then we'll probably try to process as quickly as we can. I'm going to go here and then back over there.
I'm just going to follow up on that as far as the practicality for having the one-day trucking permit. A lot of times it would be in a case where, like, let's say your delivery van is in an accident or something like that,
Mhm.
and you need to make deliveries next day. If there's not.
Then you email us, you email the permit unit and say, this is my situation.
And you would just get
Yep.
like, let's say it was like a U-Haul or something, you would just need to like, do you need to know like the license plate number or VIN or whatever, like you wouldn't maybe get.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not sure if we go into that much detail, but, you know, if you have a situation like that, contact us and we'll do our best to work with you.
And then when they tell you, don't contact me.
You're gonna have everybody calling you.
I know, you say no a lot.
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay, just really quick,
Yeah, so my question about the marketing permit and the temporary permit. So if you have a temporary permit, I believe you cannot get a marketing.
no, because the advisory refers to licensees and you're not a licensee yet.
So is that something that, you know, would stay that way? I mean, because if you're,
So-
you know,
So every couple of years, the members go back and take another look at all the advisories. They see if they have to be updated. Like I said, we just updated the marketing permit advisory within the past year.
I wasn't aware of that though until you just mentioned it, so yeah, we're gonna fix that.
You're also what, Marina, right here?
But we're gonna talk about
Yeah,
fixing that.
Why don't you mention that?
yes, we're on our third temporary license, and part of the delay was that half of our owners' fingerprints got lost, and then it was after the 6 months we guys couldn't access it. But, you know, we're on our third temporary, it's quite, it ties your hands without being able to get that marketing permit or really anything, have to stand there.
No, but keep in mind, like, you know, the temporary permit is brand new, okay, for the most part. We're still adjusting to it. There's, you know, like I said, the advisory for the market permit gets changed every few years when we get, you know, people ask us new questions about things, we make tweaks to it. We got rid of that notice requirement, so, you know, so we do try to make improvements as we go along. Yes, sir?
Yes.
The first guy in the hat and then the second guy in the hat.
So my question is about, I have a wholesaler and he has a website that retails beer directly to a consumer. So my product's on that website. Can I drive traffic from my own marketing programs via, if it's online or in my, anywhere?
So a wholesaler
Is
is,
he licensee or is he a wholesaler?
He's a C.
that's a wholesaler, so he's a beer wholesaler with the privilege to sell at retail, and he's selling online?
Yeah.
We're not gonna discuss that right now. Because our counsel is here, and she may not start wanting names, okay? So,
Wait, I'm sorry, what's that?
what I'm saying is, he's not supposed to be doing that. We're moving on. You don't wanna get the wholesaler in trouble. Yes, sir.
The past year I was listening on an opportunity, but my branded location on the spot at High School Foot Place, I can't operate because it's under food service operation by company. So I'm not gonna get into details, but basically they have a liquor license, they operate restaurants at this place, and it was gonna be branded with my logo and things in it. And apparently there was a big decision from down in New York City on a fine that was levied on a brewery for doing that. And when I looked at it, farm breweries aren't allowed to do it, but brew pubs are. Is that like a gap in the law that we could go after? Because it's a huge opportunity where like a farm brewery, we would never get the opportunity to operate in a space like that.
So, I guess, generally speaking, as a manufacturer, you can't have a relationship with a retailer where your brand is going up there, okay? There are some advisories that explain how, with a independent third party in the middle, it can be done, all right? But you can't have a direct relationship like that. Now, as far as, see, there is no such thing as a brew pub, at least under the law. Generally, when we talk about a brew pub, we're talking about a restaurant brewer, right? A retailer, all right? So there are restaurant brewers, and then there are brewers who have restaurants, all right? And when we talk about, when we talk about brew pub, we're talking about you, the restaurant brewer, who can have their own name. Or if you have a brewery with your own on-premises license, You can have your name up wherever you want to. All right. I guess, are we out of time? Yeah.
Yeah, I got 4 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I want to get some questions. Go ahead.
So I have 2 quick questions. One, the marketing permit, you said there, you can only go to the same space so many times? Like if you do a farmer's market every
No, I'm talking about if you've had a marketing permit for a while, you know there's that catch-all provision. There's a list of things you can go without telling us. Then it's like any other place you want to go to, you got to send us 15 days notice. That's what I'm talking about. So the farmer's market, the county fair, the state fair, not-for-profit events, someplace that sells beer, you can go there as many times as you want to. All right? I'm talking about the other places. You want to set up that kiosk in the middle of Woodbury Plaza and sell your beer. Okay? That's the other place. Okay? So mostly it's unlicensed places, commercial venues. All right? You know, some business that, you know, Home Depot wants you to put up a kiosk and sell your beer in there, which I think is a great idea myself. Okay? But you can't, you only can do it so many times a year. And just let me know when you're going to be there.
So that permit includes the transportation. What about if you have like a 1-day event permit? Does that include the transportation as well?
Like, I mean, for a special event, a temporary beer and wine permit.
Yeah.
That's covered by your license, the transportation. So you're fine. Yes, sir. One more and that'll be it.
Last year you guys were talking about like creating a clear pathway to get a C103 license for manufacturers. Is there any updates on that?
So you're talking about, okay, so in the law, and it's been in law for 50, 60 years, there was an ability for a brewer to get a beer wholesale license that has the retail privilege. And nobody ever asked for it, okay? So we're setting on, I got to check because I think we had some issues with our IT people as far as getting that all set up. All right. All set then, I guess?
Thank you.